Hey, James, we're talking to accomplished filmmaker Andrew Jarecki. He has done a documentary on the atrocious conditions in the Alabama prison system. 277 deaths last year, inmates brutalized, rampant drug use, and few rehabilitation programs. But, Andrew, there are a lot of terrible state systems. Louisiana and Mississippi come to mind. Why did you choose Alabama?
Well, originally, I didn't really choose to make a film about prison at all, but I've been interested in all the problems in our prison systems. And we got access to one prison, Easterling Prison in Alabama, because we met a chaplain who was doing a revival meeting there. And the warden was allowing us to do that. And that was really an extraordinary window because we went in there and we started meeting men who immediately said to us, the situation in here is urgent. They're killing people regularly. Guards are killing people. People are dying of drug overdoses at the highest rate in the country, suicides at the highest rate in the country. And the people bringing in the drugs are the guards. So the Alabama Department of Corrections is not only the largest law enforcement group in the state. It's also the largest drug dealing operation. And we recognized that those men were not really going to be able to talk to us on camera. And then eventually we get nosy and we sort of get thrown out of that prison. And then we discovered that there is a network of incarcerated leaders inside that prison system who have access to contraband cell phones. And so for the first time, we were able to make a film where it wasn't just what you got to see curated by the prison authorities, but we were really seeing the unvarnished truth through the cell phone cameras of men who are currently incarcerated. And they
Well,
were the
that's
ones
what
who were able to
yeah,
tell the
that's
story.
what made it so powerful, Andrew. I think you named them: Robert Earl Council, Melvin Ray, and Raoul Poole. They displayed enormous courage. How have they been treated since then?
Well, they've been retaliated against years before we ever met them. And actually, when the film came out at Sundance 2 Januaries ago, the state government didn't really know what to do with it. So they just gave a statement to George Stephanopoulos, somebody that James has some familiarity with, where they said, well, we're aware of the film, but we cannot comment on the authenticity of the material in it, which is kind of like a fake news answer.
Yeah.
And they didn't say anything. And since that time, the men, I think, have been somewhat protected by their appearance in the film. And
Good.
then, quite recently, I would say a month ago, their supporters announced a work strike. And that's a big problem for the state because they get $450 million a year in unpaid labor from prisoners. And as soon as that work strike was announced, all three of the people in our film were whisked into solitary confinement. And so, Alabama doesn't react much to people exhibiting the brutality of what they're doing in the prison system, but they really don't like it when you interfere with the forced labor effort.
Well, tell us the story about Sandra Ray and her son Stephen Davis.
So Sandy is a regular white mom living in Uniontown, Alabama, a town of about 400 people, and we had never met her. But one of the incarcerated men in the film, when we started making it, had texted us to say there's been somebody beaten very badly at Donaldson Prison, and you should look into it. He has currently been brought to UAB Hospital. And so we jumped in the car and drove to UAB Hospital, and we sort of just found our way to the room, the ICU room where this young man was. And by the time we got there, we found that he had passed away. And so he was in a body bag in his hospital room. And immediately we thought, we better go visit, try and find his mother, because often the Alabama state prison system does not even inform the relatives that somebody in their family has passed away. And especially if the person was the victim of being killed by a corrections officer, which is what happened in this case. And so we went to Uniontown and we were on the porch at Sandy Ray's house, and she had just lost her son just hours before that. And she said, if you guys are making a film about this, I want to help you. I don't want this to happen to any other mom. And so, here she is she's got an oxygen tank. She's living in this tiny town in the middle of nowhere in Alabama. And she said, teach me how to record my phone calls. I know that they're lying to me right now. The prison is calling to tell me that my son attacked the guards or that it was his fault that he was murdered. And so we were able to embed with her as she started to hear the cover up coming out of the prison, and that was a very powerful experience.
What happened to the guard who killed him?
Well, so far, nothing has happened to the guard who killed him. His name is Roderick Gadsden, and it's undisputed that Gadsden killed Stephen Davis. Um, and it's an unusual situation. You have a black prison guard who's killed a young blonde white kid, and has been able to do it with total impunity. In fact, despite the investigation that we did in the film, which makes it clear through dozens of witnesses that he was observed murdering somebody. He has been promoted twice since the incident, and
Promoted.
they're just acting like, yeah, I mean, they essentially reward this kind of behavior because they like to run their prison system with almost no staff. And so you end up bringing in these incredibly brutal guards. And there was just a big expose in the Guardian saying, this man may be the most violent prison guard in America. Why is he still working at the Alabama Department of Corrections? And that's a
Oh,
question I
wow.
think people are asking.
The governor of Alabama said, it's our problem. We can fix it. Well, they sure as hell haven't fixed it. Why hasn't the federal government tried to take over?
Well, James can tell you that the federal government doesn't have nearly as much power in these states as we imagine they do. So the DOJ started an investigation into the Alabama state prison system, and they came out with these two findings letters that basically said this is the most brutal and most deadly prison system in America. And Alabama's response to it was not to say, oh, okay, well, we're a little bit embarrassed by that. And of course, we've got to do better, or we'll enter into a consent decree with you and try to, have a monitor or something. They just said this is not true. It's just anecdotal. It's not the case. We don't have a systemic problem in our facilities. And so the DOJ did very little, even though it was the Trump DOJ that brought the lawsuit, which is, seems like quaint, seems like a long, long while ago now. But in today's world now, Trump's DOJ is taking the view that the Civil Rights Division is all about, pursuing anti-white bias, and that whole division that was designed to protect people who were in the worst prisons, right, places where there were the most egregious offenses by police officers or corrections officers. It's not like the DOJ was taking on, cases that were marginal. They were taking on the worst cases of systemic problems in these states, and now all those lawyers are gone.
James.
So, Andrew, what has changed since you've made this film, and more importantly, what do you hope changes going forward? If anything changed the way they do business?
I would say that they know that they're being watched now. They know that millions of people have seen this film on HBO. We've had 100 screenings across Alabama. There have been people protesting on the steps of the Capitol just maybe 3 or 4 days ago. There were a few hundred people that showed up with pictures of their loved ones on the steps of the Capitol, people who had died in the custody of the state. And so there's a much higher level of awareness because, they can't deny the visibility of it. They can't deny that it's happening if it's on video. And these whistleblowers inside have been able to prove that it's happening. So now they're sort of stuck with that. And most recently, Kay Ivey, who's done some incredibly destructive things. I mean, she was the one that said we're going to solve this prison problem by building mega prisons, which is a crazy idea and an economic disaster for Alabama. As she promised she'd build 3 new mega prisons for $900 million. She didn't have the money to do it. She raided the COVID funds that she was getting from the federal government to pay for the prisons. Then she announced that she still didn't have enough money to do it. And so she was going to take $100 million from the education budget and put that toward these new prisons that the DOJ doesn't even want her to build. So Kay Ivey is sort of very bad news. And I think she's just either blind to the problem, willfully blind to the problem, acting like it doesn't exist. And so what we've seen recently with this sort of public outcry, I think maybe the funniest thing that has happened, if it wasn't so tragic, is that she said nothing for a year, and then the film got nominated for the Academy Award a couple of weeks ago, and she immediately came out with a statement basically saying, the Oscars are for losers, and by the way, she's the greatest governor in the history of the state, and she's been so helpful in improving the prison problem.
So let me, you said something earlier in the show, and I just wanted, because I'm in Pacific Ocean and we're here, it's right, that there are a group of prisoners, a cabal, that the prison administrators allow to have certain devices. Is that what you said? Is that
Well, it's not that they allow it. It's that, the prison administration says that the men cannot speak to the press, right? And
okay?
so it happens that there is a contraband cell phone trade inside the prisons, which allows the men to get the word out. And in fact, in this case, sort of in collaboration with us, because we were in a position to make a film about it. And so even though it's ostensibly illegal, the cell phones are all coming in from the guards, right? So it's sort of like the guards are the ones that are providing the devices that are allowing us to reveal the abuses by the guards and the administration.
So if you were nominated, the Academy Award is coming up. Do you think if you got nominated and won that would give this film more impact? If it really
Well,
wanted
the
to
film,
reform the business?
the film did get nominated, and that's why she came out with this sort of reaction. She said the Oscars we always knew the Oscars had a low bar, and by the way, she's an amazing governor for prisoners. Um, but clearly, they do not want the film to advance any further. They certainly don't want it to win an Academy Award. They act in Alabama like they just don't succumb to any kind of public pressure, that they've got their own version of reality. They don't care. The state motto is, "We dare defend our rights." Some states' motto is like, "Welcome, we have, beautiful sights and views and mountains." In Alabama, it's, "We dare defend our rights." And so their attitude is, we do not want anyone on the outside telling us what to do with our prisoners. But it's very clear that the pressure does have an impact on them. Nobody likes this. Nobody likes to be a legislator in Alabama and be seeing a film that shows that you are overseeing death camps in your own state paid for by taxpayers.
Well, uh, I hope you win, because not only, I mean, you're a terrific filmmaker. Before I let you go, tell us about some of the other works that you've done to give our viewers some perspective on your career as a documentarian.
Sure. Well, James, you and I met long before, but my first film that I made was called Capturing the Freedmans, and that film was really about it was sort of in and around the justice system, but it was working on that film that brought me into Dannemora Prison in upstate New York to see sort of the brutality of even how they treated visitors in that prison. So since that time, I've tried to visit prisons as much as possible. And then eventually I saw the other side of the justice system because I started making a film about Robert Durst, who had killed 3 people over 30 years, but was also part of a billionaire family in New York. And Robert Durst was allowed to get away with murdering a lot of people because the authorities didn't really want to go up against him, because they knew he was going to have unlimited resources and because there were a lot of people protecting him. So I got to see, in making this film, sort of the how the justice system works for the most impoverished people who don't have representation, who don't have any control over what prisons they go into or any of that. And I got to see it in making The Jinx. And in The Jinx, that was a very public phenomenon, and that became kind of a sensation because we developed evidence about Robert Durst's life that proved that he had killed these 3 people. And when it appeared in the film, which was on HBO, was 6 episodes. So we reveal that evidence, and he actually confesses to murder in the last episode. And he was arrested the day before that episode aired. So that was very
Oh,
dramatic. But it was an example of what happens when, you really can, you do have the power and money to manipulate the justice system.
Oh, wow. Be a filmmaker with impact. We love that. Albert?
Well, we'll let you go, but I can't help but thinking one of the candidates for governor in Alabama this year is Tommy Tuberville, widely considered the dumbest man in the Senate. When you describe Kay Ivey, she may be the only person on this planet that Tommy Tuberville would be an upgrade. I mean, it really is says something pretty pathetic about Alabama politics, Andrew.
Well, remember on the positive side, James, do not poo-poo this idea. Or I'll ask you, do you think it's possible that Doug Jones has a chance to win in Alabama, especially if this prison issue becomes as public as it's becoming?
Yeah, I think Doug. I mean, I've talked to him. He's running. If any Democrat could win in Alabama, it would probably be Doug. And if he could beat any Republican, I mean, how to get Roy Moore again, but Tuberville he's pretty good. I mean, it's a damn good matchup in that governor's race. That's all I would say. Before I let you go, because this is something we always talk. How many Epstein films do you think are going to be made in the next 10 years?
How many
I mean,
what?
It's just unbelievable. The material in that for anybody. It might be too much.
No, I mean, I always think that these, like the instantaneous, salacious stories, like, so and so killed his wife, or Jean Benet or whatever, those usually end up being very boring documentaries. And one of the reasons is you don't have the time and space when everybody in the streaming world is rushing to make a story about whatever it's going to be. So poor Savannah Guthrie and her mother. I guarantee you that's going to be as 5 different documentaries at various levels of quality, going down to the most salacious, most terrible. And none of it's going to be true, right? It's all going to be rushed, hurried, because one streamer is trying to chase the other streamer to get it out first. And that's just not ultimately very good investigative reporting. So because we made this film over 7 years, we were able to do it in a very different way. And that's, the great thing about documentary filmmaking, and the reason why documentaries are exciting to watch, is time compression, right? I'm seeing, James, I watched the film about you that our friend Matt Turnauer made. And the thing that's great about it is I get to compress your entire career in front of my eyes in an hour and a half or whatever. I can really see the arc of your life, and I can have a ride along to some of the most interesting things that have happened in, American politics. That's because of the ability to compress time. So for us to be able to show something that's a 7-year story, but compress it so that people can absorb it in its complexity and see beautiful things and see men inside who have been locked away, who have incredible brains and incredible ability to organize and motivate, that's a really exciting thing. And we're really happy to do that. And I will say also, for people that want to do anything about the prison crisis in Alabama, if you go to the website, thealabamasolution.com, it's not like a promotional website for the film. It's really a deep dive into what's going on in Alabama. And then there are a bunch of action items that you can do that are relatively easy, like calling the prison system and complaining, which matters.
Andrew, in the great Carville documentary, were you impressed with our technological capabilities?
I was impressed. I thought you were the best part of it, to be honest. I don't even know why.
Listen, good. The best of luck to you. It's a really important story, and thank you for joining us today. We really do appreciate it.
We're very proud of you, man. We're very proud to have you on the show. I think you're going to win, and I think when you win, I think Pope Leo and his visit to America is going to visit an Alabama prison. That would be my fondest dream.